Welcome back to Behavior Basics Part 2 on Zoom. And I'm Christy Klaus. I think most of you know me, Family Support Coordinator. And tonight we have Melanie Hammel, who I'll let her introduce herself again to the group. And then we're going to go ahead from what we learned from last week and build on that, a little review, and then move forward and have questions at the end.
Thank you, Christy. Yes, I'm Melanie Hammel. I'm a board certified behavior analyst, and just going to be talking to you guys more about behavior basics today. So I'll go ahead and share my screen and review a little bit from last week and kind of what we went over, and then I'll add on that. So we went over that there are 4 functions of behavior, and last week we talked about escape and attention. So then this week we'll talk about access and automatic. So we talked about kind of what these behaviors can look like. So what escape maintain behaviors can look like, and how everybody's behaviors can look a little bit different but serve the same function. A lot of the times we see the same type of behaviors with different functions, or even sometimes dual functions. So it could have 2 or 3 of the same functions, kind of depending on how we're responding. We talked about how we often respond with escape maintained behavior, specifically like removing the work, lessening the work, soothing the child, negotiating bribery, those sorts of things. We talked about preventing it, so those antecedent strategies. So giving them functional communication tools on how to ask for help or a break ahead of time, praising that appropriate work frequency with verbal praise, offering choices, scheduling those breaks, usually using lots of visuals to help promote those appropriate behaviors and decrease those escape maintained maladaptive behaviors. And then we also went about how we should react. So I kind of went through all of the ways, and it is a little bit repetitive, but all of the ways that we can react to avoid reinforcing those escape behaviors. So some of them are reviewing the expectations, using that first then statement, using those gestural prompts like pointing or tapping, and then always following through with the original demand. And then most importantly is how we're going to teach those replacement behaviors. So modeling that form of communication, providing praise when the appropriate behaviors are exhibited, any of those behaviors we want to reinforce and ignore all of the rest of them. And then for attention, very similarly. So a lot of those attention-seeking behaviors that we see, the showing off, the silliness, the property destruction, yelling at others, those sorts of things. Again, these can look a ton of different ways and serve that same function. So we also talked about how we often react, and this one can definitely be a really tricky one too, because this is one of the most seen functions of behavior, because attention, everybody loves getting attention. So we see this a lot. And so a lot of the times we're just responding anyway to kind of get through that behavior as fast as possible, because maybe we don't have a high threshold that day for, dealing with some more of those tricky behaviors. So reprimanding, that negotiation or bribery, giving that attention piece, trying to make them laugh or redirecting them from that behavior. So again, these are the ways that we want to preventing it. Attention for all those appropriate behaviors, for everything and anything. Remember, we talked about challenging yourself to, even if you're feeling frustrated, to still provide that praise for those appropriate behaviors, no matter if they're big or small, like walking towards the kitchen table, or even making eye contact, or putting one dish in the sink, the smallest things we want to reinforce, which I know can be challenging, but we did talk about that. Teaching them to appropriately ask for attention. That's a huge one. Using your name, using their teacher's name, asking them to ask you to spend time with them, those sorts of things. And then always, praising them accordingly when they are using those appropriate replacement behaviors. And then what to do when it occurs. Again, this one can be the trickiest one, because if they're saying mom, mom, mom 8 million times, and maybe on that 10th time they say mom, you just are like, what? You still have to ignore those behaviors, as tricky as it may be. Like I said, those nonverbal cues are huge. That pointing, that tapping, bringing whatever the expectation is in their eye line. Like maybe it's their laundry basket and you're just scooting it closer to them. Never arguing, keeping those facial expressions and that body language very neutral so that they know they're not getting under your skin or not frustrating you at all. Because the second that they know they've frustrated you, they now have a lot more to work with. Using that first then statement. We don't try to talk to the kiddo or try to engage in conversation. And then, as always, we want to throw them a party when they have complied and done what you've asked them to do. So I know that was like a really brief overview. And that the replacement behaviors for attention as well. It is a little bit repetitive. Mostly it is that communication, because all behavior is a form of communication. So once you teach that communication piece, that is going to be your gateway to all of the appropriate behaviors, because you're going to be honoring and reinforcing that communication and opposed to the behaviors. So modeling that communication is always going to be your first step and your best friend. So again, those are just a little bit of a brief overview from last week. So then this week, my plan is to go over the next two functions of behavior, which is access to tangibles and an automatic function. So we'll talk about those. And then I created like a brief overview of kind of like what the next steps can be for you and your family, or if you're working in a school setting, what your next steps can be. Home situations and school situations are going to be drastically different. And today I'm going to be geared towards more of a home-based setting. So if you are in a school setting, please let me know, and I can also go over that process, because I am very familiar with the public school process of how you can go about getting a behavior plan for a student. And then, of course, we'll have time for questions. And then I do have a couple slides that go over practicing determining functions and how we should respond and how we shouldn't respond. So if we have time, we'll go over all of that. But my main points that I want to finish on are the two other functions of behavior, and then showing you guys that action plan and how to collect some data on some behaviors that you see. And then, as always, you can write your questions in the chat, and either Christy can call them out in the moment if you'd like, or we can go over them at the end. So I'll go ahead and get started. Excuse me. Okay, so the next function of behavior is access to tangibles. So that's wanting to gain access to something such as a food, a tablet, a preferred toy, going to the park, something like that. So wanting access to something, I talked about this last week, we engage in all of these same functions of behavior. So maybe we want ice cream, we want to get access to that preferred food item, or we want to have access to a favorite TV show or a vacation. We engage in our own access, maintain behaviors as well. So a lot of the times when this is the function of the behavior, this is the kind of behaviors you will see. So grabbing the item away, maybe sharing is something that your child struggles with their siblings, or in a school setting, they're grabbing that item away because they want access to it 100% of the time. Or when you are removing that item or blocking access to that item, they're engaging and yelling at you and give me that item. Property destruction, that aggression or tantrum, self-injury, dropping to the floor, hiding, maybe trying to like sneak around you and going and getting that item when your back is turned. Those are all some common behaviors you might see if that function serves as access to tangible items. So again, I have it set up the same way for the other functions of behavior. So how we often react. So when your student or your child is wanting access to something, we often just say, okay, here it is, you can have it. You threw a fit long enough, and I don't really care if you have the tablet for 5 extra minutes, go ahead and have it. Or maybe they didn't do their homework, and you said that if they did their homework, they got ice cream later, and then a couple hours later, they're like, I want ice cream. And you were like, no, you don't get ice cream. And then they kept asking, and you're like, okay, fine, you can have one ice cream bar. Reprimanding the child. bribing that, negotiating, attempting to soothe, like, I know you want that toy and I'm sad that you want that toy. It's just not a choice right now. Or negotiating, like, okay, your brother can have the toy for 2 minutes and then you can have it for 5 minutes. Those sorts of things would definitely be a common way that we respond. Oh, no, you can't have your tablet, but oh, look at all these other toys that you can have, offering them something else or removing the item from the environment. This is something that I typically see a lot. So if I have a client personally that struggles with tolerating giving up the item or sharing the item, or putting it away ever, their response is, well, we'll just pull it out of the classroom and they just can't have it anymore. Well, that's not really teaching them anything. That's alleviating your problem, out of sight, out of mind, but that's really not teaching them anything in that moment because, well, it's a toy, it's functional. They should be able to play with that. That's a great opportunity for us to teach them a bunch of other skills. So a lot of times we just say, like, out of sight, out of mind, let's just remove it completely. Or again, change the expectation. So maybe you said, okay, 5 more minutes on your tablet. And then that 5 minutes is up and they throw their tablet and they through the couch cushions and they're yelling at you and you're like, okay, mom will give you 10 more minutes on it. So those are a lot of the ways that we oftentimes respond. So again, we're going to back up on how we can prevent those behaviors from occurring, because this is always our starting point after we determine that function. So blocking access to the item during behavior. So we never want to give that item back when those behaviors are being exhibited, because guess what? You just reinforce every single behavior that they got with exactly what they were wanting. And like we talked about last week, next time it's going to take twice as long to break that tantrum, because they knew the day before, after they threw themselves on the ground and maybe broke a pencil or yelled at you or ran into their room, they know mom's going to give us back that item. So what we do is we block access during those behaviors, and we do not, under any circumstances, give that item back. Reminding them that they can earn it back. So maybe it's on a reinforcement system that you have in your home, and every day after they come home from school or come home from work, they get a preferred item for a certain amount of time. Remind them, like, okay, it's all done for today, but tomorrow after you come home from school, you can earn it again. Just reminding them that that reinforcement is available again, just not right now. Teaching them to ask for more time. The key to this is to teach them before that behavior occurs. So you're not going to say, here's your tablet for 5 minutes. And then after you give them that tablet for 5 minutes, and they have a whole bunch of behaviors, you can say, oh, well, you can ask for more time. And then they ask for more time, and then you give them back their tablet. You want to teach them this before all of the behaviors occur. So say it's tablet time or TV time or whatever their, preferred item is. And you say, okay, when your timer goes off after 5 minutes, you can say, Mom, I want more time on my tablet. If you're all done with your tablet, then you can put it away. So you're giving them that skill before the behavior starts. And then after that timer goes off, you're going to remind them, hey, your timer went off. Was there something that you wanted to ask for more of? I actually make a lot of visuals for my clients with this. I actually just made a SpongeBob visual for one of my early learners for his mom to use at home. So transitions can be pretty difficult for some kids with disabilities. So if they have a little bit of control over how much time they have left, sometimes I'll make like little tokens. So sometimes they're a clock, sometimes they're SpongeBobs, or sometimes whatever. And I make it really fun so it's interactive with that child. And every time their timer goes off, they can ask for more time with one of their tokens. So that token symbolizes 1 more minute, and when all their tokens are gone, all their time is gone. So it kind of helps them with that transition off, like, oh, all of your SpongeBobs are gone. That means we're all done with this. We can do something different. Timers are going to be your best friend. Any of those visuals will be really helpful for them to anticipate that transition. Let's see. Teach the child to wait for an item. Waiting can be a really difficult skill that some individuals struggle with. I know I sometimes have a hard time waiting. If I order a pizza and it's taken too long to be delivered, I can be a little bit impatient too. So teaching them to wait. And the way that you can do this is you just start off small. Whatever they can tolerate starting off with, you work on that and you praise them for the waiting, and then you can kind of build on that. So if you're saying like, okay, first your brother's going to pick a show on the TV, or first mom's going to pick a show, and then it's your time to pick a show. We can set a timer while we wait, or you can count while we wait. Because waiting is an important skill for them to learn. So that is something you can teach them as a preventative strategy too. And then I kind of already talked about this, using those visuals of when they have access and it's available again. So if it is that one time of day that they get something, maybe every evening after dinner, they get to watch a show. And that's like the time of day that they get to watch like their all-time favorite show. You can make that part of their visual schedule for maybe their evening routine. And you can show them like, okay, this was our schedule for Monday. Tomorrow we get to do it all over again, and you can have it again, just so that they know I get to have access to that again. Because I think sometimes individuals will struggle with thinking, well, if it's gone, I never get it again. And that's where a lot of the behaviors will happen. They'll just say like, it's gone forever. And that can be like a very overwhelming thought. So if they know that it's available again, that does help kind of ease that toleration of giving up that item or at that activity at the time. And then, as always, you guys will get tired of me hearing this, that first then statement. It is my favorite statement to use of all time. And it is really, really helpful because it's helpful for you as the person delivering the expectation and the demands, and it's helpful for them. You're not overly trying to communicate with them. They're not trying to receive over communication. So it's keeping it very simple for both of you. And I know sometimes if I kind of get caught up overly communicating or overly trying to explain something, then I find myself getting frustrated a lot faster. And same with them. If they're trying to hear too many things at one time, they're more quick to get frustrated. So that first then statement will be really helpful. Okay, so how we should react. So again, this is going to make or break the behavior from happening in the future. We can prevent it in all of those ways, but really, like I said last week, the way that you respond is the end all be all for how likely that behavior is to return. And so if this is a behavior that you are really, really wanting to get rid of, we call it putting it on extinction. We have to follow all these strategies for responding. And again, we have to be fully in it. So we have to be ready and prepared to respond the same way 100% of the time, or that behavior is never going to go away. So again, we're not going to talk to the child, not going to try to negotiate with him or her, offer other things. It is not the time to reason with them. So if they're going to come home, especially maybe if you have an adult child that you're working with, or even the younger ones, and they're sitting here being like, well, it's a really hard day at work or at school, and Sally was mean to me, and I just really wanted extra time on my tablet, and blah, 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 blah. And they're pulling out all those tricks out of their hat to get access to whatever it is they're wanting access to. And you sit down on the floor with them, or you sit next to them and you say, I really understand that your feelings are hurt and you're feeling sad right now. And, you're engaging in this huge, long conversation. Always remember, if that conversation and if that response is not changing the behavior, stop doing it. So you having this lengthy conversation with your, child over all their reasons why they need 5 more minutes on the TV is not going to stop them from throwing this fit the next day for maybe 10 minutes longer and 20 minutes longer. So it's not the time to reason with them. I'm not saying you can't ever explain things to your child, because I do think there is something to be said about explaining our reasoning to things, but those explanations can always happen beforehand. Always can happen when the behaviors are not occurring. So again, we can have all of these learning opportunities, but never, ever, ever during a behavior. And then that maintaining the non-reactive response. So do you guys remember my silent statue? That's going to be you guys again with this as well. You are going to be as non-reactive as possible. And what I think is important is if you have a spouse at home that you guys are working as a team through this, kind of having that communication between each other of like when you need to tap out. I think it's really important to know that if you feel like, okay, I've got to tap out on this one, I'm feeling frustrated, I need a break, this is a lot for me, to be able to communicate with your partner, or if you have one of their siblings are helping at home, or if you're at school, maybe like a teacher's assistant or a para to help like communicate with them, I need to take a 5-minute break, then I can come back and support you again. Always knowing your own limits, because if you're escalated when your child or your student is escalated, you cannot de-escalate them when yourself is escalated. And I know that because I've tried. I would be like on the verge of tears trying to de-escalate this client, and I'm like, why isn't it working? And I'm already heightened myself. So you have to be, it's totally understandable and totally okay that you've got to take a 5-minute or a 10-minute, or if you're like, hey, I can't do this one for the day, like you've got to tap in and finish it for me. That's totally okay. Maria, did you have to add something?
I have somewhat of a question, I guess. When discussing this and you're talking with an adult, if they are reacting, but you don't want to treat them like a child, you want to like treat them like an adult, is this still the response you would advise?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and you can give me a specific scenario. You just kind of change like your first end statement, or kind of like how you're wording things. You wouldn't word things the same way for a child as you were like an adult. Because when I give first end statements, I try to make it like exciting, like first we're going to do your homework and then we get to play together. You wouldn't say that with your adult client or your adult child. You would say, sometimes I've even used like, then Miss Mel gets to leave you alone. Like that has been a reinforcer for some of my kiddos. For you, Maria, like if you have a client who's maybe wanting to end the conversation or wanting to be on their own, you can use more adult geared than phrases in your responses. Or you can always say like, I can wait until you're ready to have this conversation, with a calm body or a calm voice, those sorts of things. You can use a lot of the same language. Your delivery is just going to be a little bit different. Does that help?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. So maintaining that non-reactive. So again, kind of tapping into those support people that you have in your environment that can, maybe you can take turns with if you're dealing with maybe a lengthier behavior. And then again, I'm repetitive, but following through with that original demand. If you ever change that demand, you're always going to reinforce that behavior. No matter how small you may think the change is, it is going to cause a much more difficult time for you to break that behavior. So always remember with whatever you're saying in the very beginning that you are following through with it at the very end, especially with that access to items, because like attention and escape things, those can be a little bit easier. But if there's a physical item that you're always maybe trying to block or hide or, whatever, and they can be sneaky and kind of manipulation and, maybe be able to get access to that item, just be sure that you're always following through with that original demand. And then throwing that party when they have complied. Again, always challenging yourself. And I know it can be challenging. I'm not saying any of this is easy because it's not. But again, this can also be a time where you can tap into your spouse and say like, I'm so frustrated. I don't think I can appropriately throw them a party right now. Can you provide the praise and then I can do it next time? That's perfectly okay too. Okay, so then teaching replacement behaviors for access. So again, we always want to make sure that, we're following all those response strategies to eliminate reinforcing those maladaptive behaviors. But we can't just stop there. We have to come in and teach that replacement behavior so that they are meeting the same function, but in an appropriate way. So again, modeling that communication. Can I have more time? I want to turn after school today. Can I play on the playground or go to the park? Those sorts of things. And then providing lots of reinforcement every time they exhibit those appropriate replacement behaviors. The biggest one for this, again, is going to be that communication, because they have to be communicating to get access to something. So, you know, when with your families, you can have them communicate however best fits your family. It doesn't have to be any of these examples that I'm giving. If you're really big on wanting to work on manners with your kid, and your kid has the language abilities to build on their sentence structure, add those manners in there. I do that with some of my clients. So if I know one of my clients has a higher language ability, I work on those manners, those please, those thank yous, those no thank yous. And I really push for that in their form of communication. But maybe my earlier learners who have a much more limited language abilities, maybe they're using PECS or a communication device, or maybe they're just working on sign language and guiding. I'm taking any and all forms of communication when it comes to these type of things. So yeah, you can't expect them to communicate outside of their abilities. So, but you also can push them, if they do have those abilities, to communicate a little bit more. So you have an adult, child or client, and they're fully verbal. You're not going to just accept the, I want my iPad. You can say, you could add your name in there. You can say, like, Miss Christy, I want to play on my iPad for 10 minutes, please. And you can expect that nice lengthy sentence, and you can reinforce that. So don't be afraid to push those language abilities, as well as also meet them where they're at. So any questions about access maintain behaviors? Okay, sounds good. We'll just keep chugging along then. So our next and final function of behavior is automatic and sensory. So this is going to be probably the trickiest one that we talk about today. And I personally don't have a whole lot of experience in my career currently with dealing with this kind of function. So an automatic function is an internal cause that cannot be seen. The internal cause is due to self-seeking stimulation or a relief of pain. So I will go ahead, and I'm sure some of us have heard about stimming, or maybe like hand flapping. For my own self, sometimes when I'm really nervous or anxious, I will bounce my knee, or some people will bite their nails or pull on their hair. Those are some of our own automatic behaviors that we are doing on the outside to soothe something on the inside, is the best way I can kind of describe that. So for instance, we can't see if someone doesn't feel well, if they have a headache, if they're anxious, if they have a fever. Maybe somebody was mean to them at work and they're really sad about it, or somebody was mean to them at school and they're sad about it. Those are things we can't see. That we cannot see a headache. We cannot see sadness unless they are wearing it all over their face, which sometimes individuals just don't show emotion. Maybe they just aren't sure how to respond, so they just kind of keep it in. But maybe we're starting to see some behaviors because of how they're feeling. So those are the best way I can kind of explain that automatic function without getting too like scientific-y on us, trying to keep it all like where we can kind of understand and apply this. So a lot of the times we can see hand flapping or spinning. In my own experience, I've seen a lot of kiddos with significant self-injury of hitting the head, either with their hand or their fist, or hitting it on maybe like a wall or the floor, focusing on inappropriate stimuli. So sometimes In my experience, I've had kids who like to line up things on the floor and kind of watch the wheels turn. Or if they kind of look to the side and maybe they like flip their hand like this and they like the movement of their fingers in the corner of their eye. Self-talk can be another one. So scripting. So if they are repeating maybe lines of a movie or a show that they like. I used to work with a client who would constantly kind of repeat the same couple of sentences from a couple of shows that they like to watch. That can serve as an automatic function as well. So how to prevent these behaviors. So this, like I said, is the most tricky behavior and function to kind of work with, because on one hand, it's soothing something internal, some kind of sensory need that they're needing to meet. However, the behaviors that they're exhibiting probably aren't socially significant, or maybe they're distracting and they're not able to sit down and complete their work at school or complete their chores at home or focus at their job because of these impeding behaviors. So again, this is very difficult, but you can schedule frequent opportunities for them to access that sensory input. So sensory schedules. For instance, one time I had a client and he would do this like snap and shush at other people in his classroom because it was some kind of like self-stimulatory behavior that he needed to do several times during class. So what I did was I put him on a schedule of reinforcement. So at the end of every class period, he was able to go into a one-on-one room and he was able to snap and shush his heart out. So he was able to meet that need without it impeding his work at school and not interfering the learning of others, but he was able to do it in an appropriate way. And then reinforce other behaviors that are incompatible. So we in ABA have schedules of reinforcement, and I won't go into all of those, but there is one schedule of reinforcement that is a differential reinforcement of incompatible behaviors, which just is a fancy way of saying you can't do two things at one time. So maybe it's something. I have a kiddo currently who will like to free spin. So he just likes to walk into the middle of the room and spin. And it's really dangerous because he likes to close his eyes and he likes to just spin around, and he's really tiny and he falls and he bonks his head all the time. So what I did was I blocked the spinning, and I would put him on a spinning toy. So there are these things you can sit on top of them and spin the little steering wheel, and then they can spin around. So he can't sit on this toy and free spin in the middle of the room at the same time. So I'm replacing the free spinning with that sit and spin toy, and it's incompatible because he can't do both at the same time. But he's still meeting that sensory need, but in a more functional way. And then also working, if it's in the school, working with your students' parents, or if you are the parent, working with your medical professionals. There's a lot of help out there for sensory seeking behaviors that you guys can access. So you can always talk to your doctors about what might be a good avenue through your health insurance for the behaviors that your child is exhibiting, for them to be able to meet those sensory needs, because there are an abundance of sensory needs and we can't always have an appropriate replacement behavior for them. And sometimes getting them on that schedule of reinforcement can be really tricky, especially because if they're needing to do it right then and there, putting them on a schedule can in turn sometimes cause more behaviors. And there is research out there that says we shouldn't always block them from engaging in those behaviors because it's something that they need. So always trying your best to implement those functional replacement, toys and activities that they can do to still meet that sensory need, but maybe in a more socially significant way. So I would definitely, if that's something that maybe you're not able to do in your home or in the school, talking to those medical professionals. So blocking if necessary. And I say that because I mentioned self-injury. So again, I've had multiple clients who have significant self-injury behaviors. So Sometimes it's as far as they need to wear a helmet, or we use blocking pads to block their safety because it is a safety issue. Again, we are not really sure maybe what's causing. Sometimes maybe they have a headache. Sometimes they're anxious. Sometimes there's tooth pain. We can't see any of those things, but we can see the hitting. So if you have to block to maintain the safety, definitely block to maintain the safety. And then we kind of already talked about a lot of these. So scheduling those times and for them to access that self-stimulatory behavior. If you are going to go that avenue, it is going to take a time to kind of adapt to that kind of schedule of reinforcement and that lifestyle. Because remember, they're going from being able to do it whenever they want to now it's more structured and it's limited and they have to wait. So there's going to be a grace period, and you might see, and with all these behaviors, and I will talk about that, an increase in some of these behaviors when you are putting some of these strategies in place. My best recommendation for that is to really over explain. And what I mean that is right now, lining up our cars is not a choice. In 5 minutes, we can go in the playroom and we can watch all of our cars turn. So really showing them like right now, it's not an option, but in 5 minutes it is. Again, showing them when that is available for them. So it's not just going away forever. And then reminding them that it's not a choice in that moment. And then, so I kind of already used this. I kind of already gave some examples. The head hitting can definitely be a little bit more intense. And I always suggest talking to medical professionals when it comes to safety issues such as that. But any of these behaviors, and also remember age appropriateness. And if it is impeding in their daily life, if tapping their knee is annoying, but it's not impeding their day-to-day life, it's just going to be kind of annoying and we're going to let it happen. But if it's something like maybe they're chewing on their hair, that could be one. I've seen that happen where they're chewing on their hair and they're kind of cutting and eating chunks of their hair. We're going to replace that with probably something incompatible. So something that they can chew on, like gum or a chewy or some kind of other oral sensory need, but you're not going to just let them continue to chew on their hair, because that wouldn't fall into more that annoying kind of behavior that can cause health issues. So you have to be mindful of, is it safe for them? Is it age appropriate? What's the social significance of this behavior occurring? So once you've kind of checked those boxes, then you can kind of make your next move of how you'd like to respond. So do we have any questions about the automatic function of behaviors? Okay, sounds good. I will just keep going. So I think this is what's going to help everybody kind of what's next. This week and last week, I talked your ear off about all these different things, all these 4 functions of behaviors, how we respond, how we shouldn't respond, how we prevent it from happening, how we replace it. But now I've given you all this information, and it's kind of like, what should you do next with that information? So that's what we'll talk about now. When you have an individual exhibiting behaviors, most of the time you're not just dealing with one behavior. You're probably dealing with 3 or 5, or sometimes I've had kids deal with 12 behaviors that they exhibit. So, but I do know that you can't focus on all 12 or all 5 or all 4 behaviors at one time. So your first step is you're going to choose what behavior you want to work on. And I kind of mentioned checking those boxes. So you have to ask yourself, maybe we deal with the most dangerous behavior. Maybe we deal with the one that is impeding their daily life the most. Maybe we're dealing with the one that's, not social, the most socially significant one, and kind of go from there. So if, for example, maybe I had an adult client or a child who they were dealing with high intense aggression and property destruction that included breaking their pencils and ripping their paper. So out of those two, I'm going to automatically go with the more intense aggressive behavior because it's probably affecting way more of their day-to-day life and they're functioning in maybe school or work or home rather than, okay, if you break a couple pencils and rip up a couple pieces of paper, we can deal with that. But the aggression is really affecting your life. So that's going to be the one that I'm going to go with. Excuse me. But again, maybe we have 4 or 5 behaviors. Maybe we've got eloping, aggression, property destruction, and inappropriate vocals. Maybe we've got all those behaviors kind of going on. Maybe Johnny runs in the middle of the street with his eloping. He kind of swats at you for his aggression. He screams, "These aren't my parents," in the grocery store as his inappropriate vocals. And what did I say? The other one, property destruction. Maybe he's ripping up his paper at work. So what is going to be our first most socially significant behavior? It's going to be that eloping into the middle of the street because that's extremely dangerous. And then maybe we work on the inappropriate vocals about telling people that these aren't my parents in the grocery store. And then we kind of trickle down the list. So always making sure that you're picking that behavior that's going to impact your life and your child's life the most in like the first step. So after you kind of pinpoint what behavior you'd like to work on, then we talk about ABC data collection. And that is how we determine the function of behavior. It's actually really, really simplistic, but it tells us a lot. So in ABA with antecedent and behavior and consequence data, that's what ABC stands for. That shows us the whole picture of what's happening when the behavior occurs, and then we graph it to determine the function. So after I get done with this slide, I'm going to go in and I'm going to teach you guys on how to collect ABC data if you're interested in going that route with your child. So then you're going to collect all this beautiful data and you're going to be like, okay, my function of behavior is attention seeking, but I bet you're already going to know that before you even start taking this data because it's pretty easy to pinpoint after you kind of have some of the foundational work done. So then you're just going to stop reinforcing all those maladaptive behaviors. You're going to stop doing that whole list of things. You're going to come to my handy dandy presentation and you're going to pull up attention seeking behaviors and you're going to go to that slide that says how I usually react. And you're going to put a big X through and you're going to say, I'm not doing this or this or this or this. You're just going to stop reinforcing that behavior all of the ways that you typically respond. And then you're going to start implementing those replacement behaviors. So you're going to stop reinforcing them with the ways that you were responding. You're going to then pull up the slide that I showed you on how we are going to respond. And you're going to pick one of those things to start off with on responding. Maybe it's the silent statue. Maybe it's using that point. Maybe it's using that first then statement. You're going to use one of those handy dandy strategies. And then you're also going to start teaching that replacement behavior. So maybe your child is engaging in not a lot of behaviors, and maybe the one that is the most impactful on your family life is the inappropriate vocals. Maybe your son is just screaming your name 500 times a day, and you're like, this is affecting our home life. That's the one I want to choose. I determine the function as attention seeking. So that replacement behavior I'm going to use is we're going to teach them how to use my name in a calm, appropriate voice. So then you're going to start teaching that to your son or your daughter, and you're going to start reinforcing it. And in addition to all of those things, you're going to create a reinforcement system. So if you want to use a token board or a sticker chart, maybe with your older students or children, you use a point system or an expectation chart where they've got a list of expectations that they have to meet every day after work or school in order to gain a point towards their reward system, or going to the movies on Friday with some of their friends. You're going to create a reinforcement system. And that can be something that you guys also ask questions about on maybe what I think would be a good reinforcement system for your specific child. And you're going to start all those things. And you're going to respond again the same way every single time. So maybe you go in and your first step is to just take some data, kind of determine the function. Maybe talk to your husband or wife or your para or your teacher or your principal about what reinforcement system you're going to use. You're going to pick one of those response strategies. You're going to pick that replacement behavior. And when you're ready to do all of those things, you're going to pick a time that you're going to start doing all those things, because this is going to take time. And what I want to talk about next is something that we call an extinction burst here in ABA. That I want to, it's more of like a warning that I want all of you to just be aware of. When it comes to behavior reduction, it is never without a little bit of a kickback. So in my entire life, I have never been able to walk into a room with a kid with behaviors and be like, I'm not going to see an increase in these behaviors. I'm going to see a gigantic increase in their graphs after I put these protocols in place. So that just means they're going from being reinforced for this behavior for probably a pretty long time to no longer being reinforced for something. And that's what extinction is. You're withholding reinforcement for a previously reinforced behavior. So now you're taking that reinforcement away and your kid is mad. They are confused, they are mad, and they're like, well, why is mom not giving me this ice cream cone now that I just screamed and hit her? Because now you're following all of these tools and now you're not doing that. So now Johnny is going to start hitting and maybe kicking and biting and yelling and slamming his door and throwing his laundry down the stairs and pulling all of his tricks out of his sleeve until he is all out of tricks. And when he's all out of tricks, because you're responding the same way every single time and following through with that original expectation, now Johnny is going to understand mom's being serious, dad's being serious. I'm not getting away with this. And those behaviors are going to start to decrease. Now, when we are seeing that big skyrocket and that big dip, that means it's going to take time. So I've worked with a lot of teachers specifically who are like, I've been doing your behavior plan for 2 weeks and it's not working. That's what you're going to think immediately. You're going to be like, this is the worst information this lady could have ever given me, and none of it is working. And I'm going to tell you that you're not giving it enough time. So we always kind of preface by saying, if you are responding consistently and doing the same strategies every single time for 4 to 6 weeks, you should start to see improvement. Now, if you don't respond the same every single time, and maybe sometimes you are, and maybe sometimes you aren't, or maybe mom's doing it a little bit differently than dad's doing it, or maybe the teacher's doing it differently than the para's doing it when she's outside of the classroom, now you are never going to break that behavior. And now you're going to be in this really, really high frequency of behavior because we're back to that variable reinforcement schedule where sometimes we're being reinforced, sometimes we're not. And that's the highest level of reinforcement there is. So it's impossible to break them. So if you want to break those behaviors, you're going to have to give it time. And it's going to be frustrating and it's going to be hard, but I promise you it is so worth it in the end, because you're going to get there. You're going to get to that dip where Johnny is now doing something the first time that you ask him to do it. And he's following his expectations and he's earning his points on his reinforcements chart. And he's getting all of his smiley faces on his behavior chart at school. And he's doing all of these things. But that dip and that low point of behaviors will never happen if you don't get through that extinction burst. But if you're ever in that and you need additional support, you can always reach out to me and I can coach you through it and tell you that you're doing all of the right things as long as you're using the strategies, because it can feel like it's not working if you feel like, this is new to you guys too. So it's going to feel like a little bit of an eternity, but every single time that you follow through, the behaviors are going to shorten less and less. So do we have any questions about kind of this next plan for you guys? Okay, sounds good. So this is what an ABC, very, very simple data collection chart should look like. So this is kind of just the brief one, and then I'm going to pull up an actual one that I use with my current clients. So we include a couple different things. We include the time because you might find a pattern that you're seeing the same behaviors happen at the same time every single day. Or maybe your child goes to karate or a cooking class or Girl Scouts or whatever. And it's every Monday at 5 o'clock that you're seeing all these behaviors from occurring. Well, maybe there's something going around with it, going around with that activity that's causing all these behaviors. The location. So is it always happening in your kitchen? Is it always happening in the lunchroom at school or at their job? The location is important too, so that we can pinpoint a pattern there as well. So this is where the A comes in. A is for antecedents. So what happened directly before the behavior. So you can just take a note of this. Like he was eating an apple and sitting on a chair and somebody took the apple out of his hand. Just make a note of that. And then you're going to circle any of the behaviors that occurred. So maybe he had some inappropriate vocals. He had some property destruction. He ran out of the room, and then maybe he smacked somebody. So you can include all the behaviors that occur. Then maybe if something's not listed, you can add it. And then you're going to include, so that's the B part, the behavior part. And then the next final part is what happened directly after the behavior, which is the C part, which stands for consequence. In all of our lives, consequence has always been labeled as a bad thing, like you're in trouble, what's happening? In this case, it's not. A consequence just shows like, how did we respond to that behavior? So if we go back to kind of my slides and how we typically respond to behavior, we negotiate, we bribe, we sue. Those were all the consequences that were given to that behavior that and then reinforced them. So it's important to know how we're responding because that's how I'm going to determine what the function of the behavior is. Sometimes it gets a little bit tricky. Sometimes the behavior will start under one function and then based off of our responding, it will change functions. So maybe my friend was trying to get out of doing his work and he eloped and bit me and, tore up the classroom. And then I sat down with him and I hugged him and I said, I'm so sorry. You don't have to do your work anymore. Well, now not only did he get reinforced for escape, he got reinforced with attention. So now this response has two functions. So it's incredibly important for us to know if it has more than one function or what the function is just at all, so that we know which one of those replacement behaviors we should be teaching. And then any notes. So maybe Johnny has an ear infection, or maybe mom had to work really late, or maybe the morning routine was completely off and that's causing a lot of behavior. So I would make note of that maybe this day was a one-off and we just had a really rough day because morning routine went a little bit differently. Or maybe nothing was different and we're doing the same behaviors every Monday at 8 o'clock because we don't want to go to school. So this is just kind of like a breakdown of what an ABC data chart looks like. And it's nothing fancy. We take that and I literally make a little tally in each function of behavior and I put it into a graph and it will show me, the hypothesized function is escape or attention or whatever it is, or multifunction. So that's just like a really basic one, but I can show you another one that sometimes I use that is a little bit more school geared. So if I'm ever working with the public schools, it looks the same. So we have that before, so that antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence. But this is a little bit more fill in the blank. So we had a transition, work was presented, they were on a break. It was arrival or dismissal or other. So you can just kind of make a note of what the activity was. You would just circle what behavior. Sometimes no behavior occurred. Some people like to include that the no behavior occurred if they're maybe tracking from start to finish of the child's day. So we can see a pattern in the time of day. And then that consequence part. So the teacher ignored the behavior, or the adult or the teacher gave attention, or a peer maybe gave attention. The activity work is delayed. They got that access to the preferred item, any of those things. Again, I'm going to pull from that and I'm going to know, oh, if the work was delayed, that would go under the escape column. If the teacher gave attention, it would go under the attention column. So this is a little bit quicker of a way, but it is a little bit more limited because it is filled out for you. This isn't going to be, straight, concrete every single time. There might be some situations where a whole bunch of stuff happened at the same time and you're kind of like, 8 different behaviors happened, 40 different people responded to the behavior, and I don't really know what happened. I've been in that situation before. So this is another one that sometimes I use. And then the other one is very, very blank, just kind of like that original one I showed you. So sometimes teachers and maybe parents, this might work out a little bit better for you too. Or if you're more interested in a fill in the blank one, I'd be happy to make one that's more home geared. Most of my experience has been in the school or clinic setting, but I'm happy to make one for the home setting as well. So maybe like the chore expectation was presented, or it was dinner time or bath time, something of that nature. And I'd be happy to make it for one of you if you'd like. And again, this is just like, we call it anecdotal, which just means like you're making notes of what happened. That I can also pull data from to be able to see kind of what's going on. So it really just kind of depends on your own personal response effort, like we like to call an ABA. How much work do you really want to put in on this data sheet? Not a lot. Maybe you want to do the fill in the blank. Maybe you're willing to take the time to make all those notes and we can do more of an anecdotal one. So let's see. There we go. I want to get back to my presentation. Okay, so the next part of this, let's see, we have 30 minutes left. So if we didn't have any questions about kind of what I covered, I'd like to make it a little bit interactive and we can practice a little bit if you'd like, or we don't have to, about kind of reading a scenario and maybe what the function is. And then you guys can come up with some responses that you would try with these kiddos. So I'll do a couple, and then maybe if nobody's interested, we don't have to keep going. I think that I have about 4 on here. So first practice is Johnny sitting at his desk and the teacher is doing a lesson for math. He begins to make silly noises and tapping his pencil on the desk. He looks at his peers around him and starts laughing. What is the function? Anybody know? Oh, Linda. Linda knows.
Attention seeking.
You got it. Okay. So, Linda, how are you going to respond if you're Johnny's teacher? You could do a couple different things. So, or if Linda needs to phone a friend for some help, she can do that too.
Yeah. Well, I used to work in a school, so
Okay.
I know some of that with elementary kids. So
Yeah.
I know some of that. And silly noises. Ignoring is the big thing, but the
Good
last
job.
one
Good job.
is distracting for everyone else.
Perfect. Yes.
So-
Okay. So that's the tricky part. So,
But handling it, I would try to redirect him to the actual lesson
yes, that's a great idea.
by saying, Jimmy, do you need help with a problem? Raise your hand.
Oh, perfect. There it
Happy
is.
to come over. That would be one of them.
That was perfect. That was so perfect. So what Linda did is she determined the function, which she was spot on. Glenn, you're going to have to get the next one. So she determined the function, which she was spot on. So it was attention because he's doing all of these behaviors and he's looking around. Who's looking at me? Who's going to give me attention? And what she did was she provided an appropriate replacement behavior. She offered him that functional communication of asking for help and telling him to raise his hand. So when he raises his hand, then Linda's going to call on him and reinforce the hand raising as opposed to the silly noises and tapping his pencil.
And ignoring the silly noises
Exactly.
and not bringing attention to it.
Exactly. So you're not giving any attention to any of the inappropriate behaviors that he's exhibiting. But you did make a really good point, because you said sometimes this can be distracting to other people.
Yes,
and I
right.
talk to teachers about this a lot. And that's going to be that initial increase in behaviors that you kind of just have to get through. And the best way that I kind of gear teachers to redirecting their other students is by praising them. So I say, if Johnny's over here making noises and you're prompting him to raise his hand, maybe with that nonverbal prompt of like your hand is up and you're pointing to it, or, using him, prompting that functional communication for him to ask for help. Amidst all those prompts that you're giving, you're also reinforcing the whole class on, I love that everybody's working with a quiet voice and, they're using their pencil to write on their paper. You're giving a lot of attention for all of the appropriate behaviors to everybody but Johnny. And eventually Johnny's going to pick up on that and he's going to say, well, I really want Miss Linda to give me attention. I'm going to do my work and I'm going to write with my pencil now. So that's the whole goal. It does take time, but that is the goal. Good job, Linda. Thank you for participating.
Well, and then I got another cheat. My daughter is in BCBA, licensed certified BCBA.
Wow, Linda, you just have all the tricks, don't you? So she's already kind of taught you about all this.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
She's 31. She just left with John to take him to another activity.
Oh, okay.
So that
That's
we can do the
great.
class. Yes.
Well, I'm glad that you have one of us helping you guys and she can kind of help do this stuff in the home with you. So that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
So our next practice is Johnny receives OT for handwriting. In class, the teacher asks the students to copy a sentence from the board. Johnny starts yelling and refuses to write his letters. What is the function?
The function is escape.
Yep. Why?
Because he's yelling in order to get away.
Yeah. So what happened before the yelling started?
Copy the sentence.
A demand was placed.
The prompt, yeah.
Yep, a demand was placed. So you automatically know, okay, he was asked to do something and then all these behaviors happen. So what is the function? It's escape. Perfect, Maria. So how should his teacher respond?
I want to say it's ignore again. But then also the screaming would continue and disrupt the class.
Okay, good. You're on the right track. So if you can't just ignore it, kind of like Linda's situation, it's distracting, you got to keep going with your lesson. He needs to write his letters. What are you going to do?
I mean, I would personally try a first then statement.
Okay, what would it be?
First write your letters, then you can have a break or something.
Okay. Perfect. So, but what if Johnny's like, which has happened, he's like, F you, I don't care. I don't want to write my letters. I'm cussing you out. And now the inappropriate vocals have curse words in them, and you've got little kindergarten kiddos over here, and you're like, now Johnny is dropping the F-bomb in the middle of my class. What am I going to do?
I mean, I would remove him from the space.
Okay, so what'd you just do?
But that's reinforcing his escape. So I don't know. I've never done work in a school.
That's okay. So what tool could you give him? What could you tell him to say? If
like verbalize that he needs a break, or verbalize.
Perfect. Yeah. You can tell him, hey, we're going to write your letters. Remember, you can ask for a break or you can ask for help when you need it. Good job. You got it.
Okay.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So giving him that, prompting that functional communication, offering that break. So if escape is the function, we need to have that same functional replacement behavior. Because again, if the functions aren't lining up, we aren't getting anywhere with them, right? So if we've given them now the tools to ask for a break or help, when we present it, Johnny, we're going to write 5 letters in 2 minutes. Remember, you can ask Miss Maria for help or a break when you need it. That timer goes off. All right, Johnny, Time to write those letters. Do you need help? You can say, I need help. Johnny says, I need help. Now, Johnny's not dropping the F-bomb in the middle of your class, and you're able to get through your letters, and he's able to have a break with maybe some friends after he's written all 5 of his letters. That was great. Don't second guess yourself. You know what you're doing.
I have
Okay.
a question.
Yeah.
I think it would depend upon the age though, too, on that. Could you model behavior? Say, if I write the letter first, will you write it next to mine or on your paper or wherever,
So that's a great idea. However, if you do that after those inappropriate behaviors start, you've now just lessened the work and you've reinforced the inappropriate vocals. However, if you offer that before the behaviors occur, so maybe you're giving him that warning, that 2 minutes, then we're going to do our writing, Johnny. Do you want Miss Linda to write it with you, or do you want to write it all by yourself? You're giving him that tool ahead of time. And if he asks for it, then you're reinforcing that and not the behavior. So I think that's a great idea. You just have to be really mindful of when you're offering that strategy, because again, you're offering it after.
Next time that might not happen, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, great strategy. Just have to be mindful of if you offer it after the behavior occurs, it becomes bribery. If you offer it before the behavior occurs, it becomes reinforcement.
Gotcha.
Yep. That was a great idea though. Okay, we can do 2 more. All right. Susie's therapist comes to her classroom to get her for therapy. Susie is playing with her favorite doll and doesn't want to stop playing. Susie screams and throws herself to the ground. What is the function? I wrote these like a year ago. I forgot all about these, so I'm remembering them with you guys. And if nobody wants to participate, I can just walk through it. I can, just talk through them.
Okay, well, I know the function.
Okay, what is it?
The function is access to tangible.
Okay.
Oh no, Christy, you wanna?
She's phoning a friend.
I'm phoning Christy. I don't know, you just unmuted, so I thought you might have an idea.
I probably sometimes hard to like turn off the mom thoughts, but I'm thinking I would tell Susie that first we're gonna go to therapy and then you can play with your doll again, to let her know that she's gonna get to have it later. It's not gone forever.
Exactly. So that's great. Reminding them that it's not gone forever. And first we just have to do therapy, and then we get to have access to our dolls again. I think that is great. Another thing that you can do to prevent that is, again, those timers that we kind of talked about in those antecedent strategies. So, hey, Susie, your therapist is going to come in 5 minutes. We can do a timer or a reminder. I use that a lot with my early learners, a timer or a reminder, and then kind of giving that countdown, like, okay, Susie, in 2 minutes, your therapist is going to be here. In 1 minute, your therapist is going to be here. And then kind of counting down and say, hey, she's here. Great job. And then kind of offering a choice. So, hey, do you want to put your dolls on the shelf, or do you want to leave them out for after therapy? Kind of giving that choice again, so she knows they're going to be here when I come back. So great job,
and
everybody.
You may use these timers, but we've used them for many, many years now, is the visual timers. I'm going to Amazon, search visual timer, set them in the red goes down smaller and smaller and smaller until the time is gone. Very good for anybody that's super visual and that needs, you can do it on your phone too, but if it's a younger child, or they make them large size or small size, you can set it for whatever time, and then the red will decrease. So just a very visual way to see that time go down, because
I like
that seems to be hard.
Yes, definitely. And in our clinic, some of the BCBAs for their clients use a not time, almost time. And it's kind of like an arrow. So if it's not time, it's red, almost time, it's yellow, time, it's green. And then they kind of just gradually move it as they're getting closer to that activity to help with that transition. Okay, so that was, I thought I had 4, I only have 3. So a couple common mistakes that we make, and this is kind of towards the end of my presentation. So most common mistake we make is we talk too much, and why is this a problem? So many things, and I've already kind of told you about like my methods for avoiding talking too much. It's that silent statue, replacing your own behavior with taking a drink of water, talking to your spouse in the room, chewing a piece of gum, looking at your phone, those sorts of things. Those are the ways that we can kind of avoid that. But the reason that talking is the biggest problem is because we're trying to fix the behavior in that moment. We want to make it a learning opportunity. We're trying to do bed, bath, and nap time or whatever it is, or we're trying to get to karate on time, or we have a family party and I don't have time for this behavior. So if maybe I can talk them through it really, really quickly, we'll get out the door in the next 5 minutes. But again, after all this stuff that I've taught you, now you know I'm not going to do that because I'm just replacing or reinforcing all of these behaviors that are occurring. So remember your silent statue. If that's the best piece of advice I can give you out of this entire presentation, is that be a silent statue. So talking too much is something, we're all humans. We all talk. Some of us love it. Some of us hate it. It just kind of depends, but we definitely do it too often. If you notice, and I think this is helpful. So if you got a teammate, your spouse and you are really like, you're narrowing down these behaviors, are really going to work on it as a team, be each other's like reminder, like, hey, Glenn, you're talking too much over there. Like, go get a drink of coffee. Or Linda, maybe you need to go get a piece of gum and chew on, those sorts of things. Like, help each other out, because you're going to have to break a lot of your own behaviors while you're starting to do this. And it's going to be tough. Because you're, done the same thing. Maybe you have an adult, child, and you've done this for the past 25 years of their life. And now you're redoing all of your own behaviors. So be patient with yourself, help each other out, remind each other. Mel says to stop talking and be that silent statue. Other common mistakes that we make, waiting until inappropriate behaviors occur to teach. Again, these are not learning opportunities. These are response opportunities. So outside of the behaviors, teach them everything that you want to teach them, those appropriate replacement behaviors. That's a great time to teach them. During the behaviors is a terrible time to teach them because they're already heightened. They're not receiving any information, and you're kind of wasting your time because you're trying desperately to teach them something that they're not in the capacity to learn. And by doing that, you've now reinforced everything. So wait till they're not engaged in behaviors to make it a learning opportunity. Correcting the behavior. So if you say, oh, you're hitting is not nice. Be nice. You have gentle hands. Don't correct the behavior. Not the time to do it. Not noticing the student or your child's triggers. So we call those precursors in ABA, and precursors are warning signs that bigger behaviors are about to happen. So I have a client currently, she will make really, really strong eye contact with you and then spit right in the dead center of your face. It's amazing how good aim she has. But I know the second she looks at me, she's going to spit on me. That's her trigger. That's her warning sign that she's going to spit. Or maybe she's kind of winding up to come and like swing on me. I'm going to know. I need to take a step back. She's going to hit me. Or maybe, every single night, turning the TV off can be incredibly hard for your child. Know those signs. Know how to prepare for them. Be ready. So if turning off that TV is really hard, have that countdown, have that warning, have that visual schedule, ready for them. Be ready to praise them the second that TV goes off, those sorts of things. So knowing those triggers and those precursors are really, really important, because the faster that you pick up on those, you can offer those strategies as soon as they happen, and then you can eliminate those really, really big behaviors from following. Okay, so takeaway from the last 2 weeks. It's been so much fun working with all of you. All behaviors have a function. I love when somebody comes to me and say, oh, they just started hitting me for no reason. I'm like, there's always a reason. You just don't know what it is yet. And the same way with you guys, there's always a reason. You're just going to figure it out and you're going to be able to. So attention, escape, access to tangibles, and automatic. If it doesn't, it is always going to fit in one of those 4 columns. It's never going to deviate from that. It's never going to be for no reason. It's always going to have a reason. Remember, prevention, reinforcement, teaching. You're going to prevent those behaviors with all those antecedent strategies, knowing those triggers, knowing those precursors. You're going to reinforce all those amazing behaviors that you are going to be teaching them, and you're going to teach all of the replacement behaviors that you can think of. When a behavior occurs, consider the function and act accordingly. So remember, you're not going to respond with a different function than that behavior serves. So if your child wants an ice cream bar and you're like, hey, come talk to dad for a little while. He doesn't want to talk to dad. He wants an ice cream bar. So you got to meet the function with the function. Providing lots of reinforcement when the student is doing what they should. I know it says student, the child in this, whatever kind of kiddo or adult you're dealing with, providing all that reinforcement. Using visuals, providing choices, using timers, all those things. Choices are my most favorite thing that I use all day long. And something as simple as, do you want to answer my question? Yes or no? Give them a yes or no statement. I use that with a lot of the parents that I work with. If they're trying to talk or engage in conversation, maybe with their child, and their child is just not really interested in talking, give them an out, give them a yes or no phrase that they can respond accordingly. Maybe you need them to make a choice and they're not able to. You could set a timer. In 30 seconds, we're going to make a choice. That timer comes up. Okay, it's time to make a choice. Your child's not ready to make the choice. You can say, do you want to make the choice or do you want me to make the choice? You're giving them another choice to kind of keep it moving. And then if they don't respond, you can say, okay, I'm going to make a choice this time. You can make the choice next time. Having clear expectations and follow through. I know I sound a little repetitive over the last 2 weeks, but that's just because it is really, really consistently the same techniques that we use, and they're really beneficial and they are effective if done correctly. So that clear expectation, remember, in those short, concise phrases, and then follow through. So never deviating from the original expectation or demand. Whether it takes you 1 hour or 8 hours or 4 days, whatever it is, you're going to follow through with that expectation. And then again, have fun with your students and your children. This is intense stuff that you're doing, and I totally understand that. And in the beginning, you might feel a little bit overwhelmed trying to remember all of the things. When your child has complied and met that expectation, take a deep breath and be happy with them. You did it. They did it. Everybody did a great job. Have fun with them. Be proud of yourself. Be proud of your kiddos. What you're doing is really, really hard work on top of all the great work you're already doing with them. So remember to have fun with them.